An alert for American citizens living in the Solomon Islands. Be on guard. U.S. officials say the nation is in the midst of political unrest and warn that peaceful demonstrations may turn violent. NTD's Juliet Song has more on that.
Little more fluid at the moment, but I really would like to...
The State Department is warning U.S. citizens in the Solomon Islands about potential violent protests. That's as many residents there are unhappy with the top leader and are looking to remove him from the position. Protesters took to the streets weeks ago, asking the prime minister to resign. Later, the peaceful protests turned violent, killing 4 residents. The Solomon Islands is a nation northeast of Australia, and even though it sits far away from the continental United States, it's a point of contention between Beijing, the U.S., and America's allies. That has to do with the island's location. An expert says if Beijing could control the Solomon Islands, it could isolate Australia from the U.S. and the rest of Asia. And then Beijing could further dominate the Southwest and the South Pacific. Aside from its strategic location, the Solomon Islands also has several deep water seaports, making it an ideal military base. Back in World War II, the nation served as a critical battlefield between the Allies and Japan. And it took American soldiers half a year to seize a major island there from the Japanese. The process was known as the Battle of Guadalcanal.
This was a Japanese camp. It has now become a stronghold of American Marines from which they can clear the islands completely.
And it was one of the turning points that shifted the situation in favor of the Allies. Another island under the Solomon Islands, called Tulagi, used to function as the headquarters for Japan and the UK when they controlled the Pacific. The Japanese used Tulagi as a base to invade Australia. Tulagi's strategic advantages have earned it a spot on Beijing's radar. In 2019, a state-owned Chinese company signed a deal with local authorities. Under it, the Chinese company would have exclusive development rights to the island for over 70 years. Even though the deal later fell apart under public pressure, the deal built up closer relations. Days before the Tulagi deal, the Solomon Islands cut diplomatic ties with Taiwan and recognized Beijing instead. The current Prime Minister, Manasseh Sogavare, made the decision, a choice that upset many at the time, especially leaders of its most populous province, Malaya.
The country, Solomon Islands, it would be like...
Malaya's premier says he believes the country should partner with Taiwan because they share the same values.
Because we share the same values and same respect. That is something that we think is best for this country, that we will affiliate with someone sharing the same values and respect as we do.
What happened later was seen by many as a competition for influence. A year after the deal fell through, the U.S. gave Malaya a massive aid package, $25 million. But Beijing reportedly promised a bigger deal, a $500 million aid package, back when the Solomon Islands first made the diplomatic switch. The U.S. denies having geopolitical motives behind its aid package. External influence aside, tensions have been brewing inside the Solomon Islands. That's over issues like poverty, unemployment, and unequal distribution of resources. Weeks ago, violent protests shook the capital. Protesters marched in the streets, calling on the prime minister to resign. What started as peaceful demonstrations later turned into riots. Protesters set buildings on fire, and 3 bodies were found in a burnt building. Prime Minister Manasseh Sogavare refused to resign. Later, opponents tried to vote him out of his position. They accused Sogavare of lying and using Chinese money to cling to power. The opposition leader says the nation has been plagued by unemployment and exploited resources, and that a prosperous Solomon Islands
cannot be built on deception, insincerity, paranoia, state capture, and foreign interests.
The prime minister maintains that he hasn't done anything wrong, and Chinese funding is important for the Solomon Islands' development.
So why should I resign? The answer is very simple, Mr. Speaker. It is because I was elected by the members of parliament. So, the members of parliament represent their people. And our people elected me through their members of parliament.
It's not the first time Sogavari has run into this situation. He was voted out of his position twice before. But this time, he survived the vote thanks to the backing of the majority of parliament members. Juliet Song, NTD News.